Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2021 Jeep Grand Cherokee, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster base plate kit with removable arms. But before we do that, why don't you check it out and make sure that this is something that's going to work for you. So before we start talking about the base plate itself in depth, I figured it'd be useful to kind of cover the 5 main components that we're going to need to flat tow our Jeep down the road in the first place. That way we can kind of just refresh ourselves. So the first one's going to be the base plate, and that's going to provide us with a solid and reliable attachment point. That way we could hook our tow bar up to it. And that tow bar is going to be the second component. All right, and that's going to be the physical link that connects the front of your Jeep to the back of your RV. Third main component will be safety cables, and those are pretty straightforward. You know, they're there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. They're going to keep your motorhome connected to the Jeep. The fourth main component is going to be tow bar wiring. And what that wiring is going to do is transfer the lighting signals from the back of your coach to the back of your Grand Cherokee, keeping you safe and legal. And last but not least, the fifth main component will be a braking system. And what that's going to do is apply the brakes in your Jeep whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome, helping to bring you to a more complete and predictable stop. So this is what the base plate's going to look like whenever you're not using it and you're kind of just cruising around town. And just like anything on a Jeep, really, just about any accessory looks good, and that holds true for the base plate as well, I think. More or less, it's just going to come out through these openings and replace your factory tow hooks. If your Jeep is equipped with them. If not, you'll still have a similar setup here. It'll come out in the same exact location, so it really doesn't look out of place or anything like that, at least in my opinion. This deal over here, not too crazy about. This is something our customer had set up, and generally speaking, a lot of the setups that I've done on these Grand Cherokees, you're just going to have your 6-way round plug, and in the past, since there's a bracket to bolt this to, it comes out and you barely have to cut out an opening, and this will sit almost flush, and it actually looks really, really good. So chances are pretty good you're going to be using a setup like that and not this big panel. With that said though, whenever you are ready to use this, it's going to be super easy, and that's something that's really important with the flat tow setup. You know, not trying to mess around and spend a bunch of time trying to put together a complicated deal, you know. So when you are ready, you're going to have these removable arms, and the way these are going to work is you're simply just going to put them in place, rotate them about a quarter turn until they lock into position. It's going to be the same setup over here on this side as well. Once your removable arms are in, all you're going to have to do is take the end of your tow bar, line it up, and drop in a couple of pins. And that's because these are a quick connect style. So very simple and doesn't really take any time at all. I mean, it doesn't really get much more straightforward than this setup here. The safety chain openings are really easy to get to, so no issues there. And you know, everything's going to be nice and organized and look good whenever you have everything hooked up. One thing I did notice is the width of our base plate. It's nice and wide, which is good. You know, these Jeeps are relatively large vehicles, and so by having the arms a little bit further out kind of gives us a better footprint. And with that being the case, I feel like this will, you know, pull down the road much better as opposed to a base plate that might have the attachment points a little bit closer to the center. So that's going to be really good. You know, how the Jeep tracks behind your motorhome is really important, because that's what you're going to feel whenever you're pulling it down the road. Compared to some of the other base plates available, as far as the appearance goes, is they're really all going to look the same for the most part. You know, they're going to come out in the same areas here and have the same type of design, more or less. I will say the Demco one kind of has a more tough appearance, if that makes sense. It has a hammer tone finish on the base plate. It's a little more bulky and kind of just gives off that rugged look, more or less. If I had to choose a base plate based on appearance alone, really couldn't go wrong with any of them. I am partial to Roadmaster, and that's because I like all their other products. So particularly their tow bars, for example, and by having a Roadmaster base plate, you know you're going to be able to take a Roadmaster tow bar and hook right up to it. But that holds true also for other tow bars. So let's say, for example, if you already have a Blue Ox tow bar, you're still going to be able to use that tow bar with this base plate. You're just going to need an adapter. So a piece that'll go on the end of that other manufacturer's tow bar and will allow the two to pair up together. So when it comes down to it, a base plate you really can't go wrong with. It's going to look good and function just as well. Now, as far as the installation goes, I'm not going to lie, it's a little challenging. Definitely not the easiest one I've put on, nor the hardest. Kind of falls somewhere in the middle. I would say you could probably set aside the better part of at least half a day to do this job, but it is doable. So as long as you stay focused, really shouldn't give you a whole lot of issues. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and put it on together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the front of our Jeep, and we need to get our fascia removed. That way we have the room that we need to get our base plate on. So first thing you want to do is pop your hood, and then along this top edge here, we're going to have a couple of push pin type plastic fasteners that we need to pull out. So we're going to have one just like this on each side. You can take a trim tool or a flathead screwdriver, kind of pry up on the head of the fastener, then we can get underneath it and work the rest of it out. I'll do that same deal for this one here. Now we can move to our wheel wells, and I want to mention from this point on, anything we do to one side of our vehicle, we're also going to do to the other side because it'll be set up the same way. With that said, along this edge, we're going to have a few fasteners we need to remove. One of them up here will be a 10mm bolt. We'll pull that out. We're going to have a couple of plastic rivets. With these, you need to take a drill bit and drill out the center of them. It does help if you turn your wheels in one way or the other. It gives you some more space to work. Once you drill it out, you can work that rivet out. Sometimes they pop right out, other times, you know, you might just have to break the head off and push it in. Whatever ends up being easier. Once we have those removed, we're good to go over here. If you look on the bottom edge of our wheel well liner, we're going to have a couple more fasteners. So I have a 10mm bolt here. We'll grab our socket and get that removed. And then we're going to have a 1/4 turn type fastener here. So just rotate that and pop it out. Now if we move along to the bottom edge here, right under the front of our Jeep, we're going to have several fasteners that we need to pull out. One of them is going to be a push pin type. So grab our tool and get that one removed. We're going to have 3 more 1/4 turn type fasteners. And we're going to have 3 10mm bolts as well. Moving back here to our wheel well, what you can do is grab the liner, kind of start to fold that out of the way, and then you're going to grab this trim and start to work it off. Usually the bottom 2 come out real easy, and there will be some clips that are retaining this in there, and you can come in from behind and push on that clip and help it release, which I'll show you a better shot of that here in a second. But you want to bring it up to about here where the 1/4 panel and front fascia meet. So here's those clips I mentioned and how I released them. You know, when they're in the fascia, you come in from behind and simply just push, kind of push up on the center portion there, and While you're doing that, you can pull out slightly, and usually that'll do the trick. That'll allow you to get this released. Now we can actually remove our skid plate here. So there's going to be two 13mm bolts. We're going to pull these out. So I went to go pull these out, and it looks like someone's been in here before and threaded these in incorrectly. So they're stripped out and they're not wanting to come out. So what I'm going to do is maybe we can loosen up these two on this metal portion. Maybe just drop this out as a whole unit here. Looks like that'll work, so you can lower everything down. So usually you could take this skid plate, set it out of the way. In our case, it looks like there's some type of charger that's been connected to it for an aftermarket type accessory. So as opposed to dealing with that and removing all of it, I'm just going to kind of set our skid plate kind of next to the vehicle, and hopefully that'll be out of the way where we can just work around it. Now we can actually remove our fascia. What I've done on each side is just applied some painter's tape here along the seams. That way we don't accidentally scratch up the paint or anything like that. And this part's going to be a little tricky. What I suggest doing is starting on each side and kind of just work it to kind of help loosen everything up. And then you're going to push down in this area, then grab the bottom of the fascia and you're going to pull it towards the front and down. And what we're trying to do is get the side to separate from the quarter panel. So it is going to be tight. It's perfectly normal. And once you're kind of holding it down, and you'll see this start to separate. What you can do is just carefully start to work it around our headlight and towards the center of our vehicle. Once you get each side, released to the inside corner of the headlight, you come here in the middle, and we're going to lift up on this portion. This should be the only thing that's still holding our fascia in place. So we'll carefully start to pull it back, and we're going to check and make sure. We may have some wiring that we need to disconnect. And in our case, looks like we're going to have a connector for the fog light here on the driver's side, and it looks like a couple more over on the passenger side. So here's one of the connectors. You're gonna have a red tab. You can push that down, push down on the center and separate it. And the fog lights are kind of tricky. You're gonna have a kind of a piece on each side of it. You can start to kind of pry up on them and get it disconnected. And that should be all the wiring. So once we have everything disconnected, we can pull our fascia completely off and set it to the side somewhere safe. Now we're able to remove our tow hook. On the back of the tow hook, there's going to be a big nut. It's going to be 30mm in size. I know a lot of people won't have a socket that big, and so what you can do is just use a adjustable wrench like this. With that said, we'll go ahead and start to loosen this nut. Thankfully, they're not on there super tight. So usually after a couple of turns, you're able to remove the nut by hand. Off, we're going to move to the front of our tow hook, and we're going to have two 16mm head bolts. So we'll pop those out. And slide our tow hook out of position. With the tow hook out of the way, we can now remove the tow hook mount, which is this piece of steel here. It's going to be a 16mm head bolt right there. Drop that down. Then we're gonna have one more right there. Let's slide this out and set it to the side. Now if you look right here, we're gonna have a bolt that we need to pull out because we're going to use this attachment point for our base plate. This is a 13mm head bolt, and it will be tight. There's some factory Loctite on the thread, so just kind of a heads up. So with that removed, now we can grab our base plate. So these are going to be side specific, so check your instructions. Quick way to tell is the safety chain opening here. It's going to face towards the outside of the vehicle. And with that said, we're going to take these bolts with a split lock washer and one of these Fender washers. These are going to run up through the bottom here. And these are going to thread into those factory well nuts that were originally holding our tow hook bracket on. You do want to use red Loctite on the threads of all the hardware for the base plate, so you can grab that Hearty trailer. But we're just going to slide this in the bottom of our frame rail, and we'll get these bolts started hand tight. We'll go ahead and grab this one, this factory one that we just removed. Get some Loctite on it. Get that one going back in. And then over here, what we're going to do is take that factory bolt that we removed out of here. Get your red Loctite on it and get it started hand tight as well. Once all that hardware is in place and hand tight, we can come back and snug it down. For these two bottom bolts, I'm going to use a 17mm. And with these, you just want to tighten them up enough to where it just kind of puts a little bit of pressure on the base plate. About like that. We don't need to get too carried away here. I'll do the same thing with this one here. And the same thing with this one. For this one, I'll use a 16mm. We're gonna have one more attachment point here on our base plate, and we're gonna have an open hole right here, and we're gonna use that open hole as a template. That way we can drill right up into the bottom of our bumper beam and create a hole. That way we can get some hardware in there. So take our drill bit, try to make sure it's nice and straight, and get this drilled out. So once you have that hole drilled out, you want to do the other side of our vehicle. And then you can take this included pipe spacer. You're going to put this right here to fill the gap between our base plate and the bottom of our bumper. So we'll get that lined up. It can be a little tight, so you might have to kind of shoehorn it into position. And then what you're going to do is we're going to take this bracket, this piece that runs from side to side. We have our post here for our wiring on the driver's side. We're going to take the bolt, a split lock washer and a flat washer with some Loctite. We're going to run this all the way up and where we're going to connect it is actually inside of the bumper beam. The way you're going to get hardware in there is you're going to use this, which is called a handle nut. So you can actually take this handle nut, put it inside of the bumper beam, line it up with the bolt, and then thread it on. So inside of our bumper beam, you can see the bolt where it comes up. Just going to take that handle nut and try to get it lined up while you're kind of holding slight pressure on it, and start to turn that bolt, and it'll grab and start to thread into the handle nut. So just kind of a pointer, if you're having trouble getting this lined up, you know, it might help to have a friend hold the other side of that crossbar that runs across. That way it'll stay a little more steady and make it easier to get the bolt started. So once this is in place, come back with a 19mm socket and snug up both the bolts. Now we can come back with a torque wrench and tighten down all of the bolts to the amount specified in the instructions. You want to start with these ones on the bottom first, and if you don't have a torque wrench, you can pick one up here at eTrailer, or a lot of times you can go to your local auto parts store and rent one out from them. So once all of our hardware is torqued, we can take these handles and cut them off the nuts. And what you're going to do is just take a pair of snips and cut them right off. Now at this point, it'd be a great time to install any of your other flat toe components, such as your wiring and your braking system. And I say it because with the fascia off, we're gonna have all this extra space to work, and it just makes everything a lot easier to route our wires and everything else. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do. With that said, if you're not installing those components or you already have them in place, what you do is reinstall the front of your vehicle the opposite way that you removed it. You may or may not have to do some trimming. It's really just going to depend on your exact submodel of Jeep. But with that said, in the instructions, they do show several diagrams on how you would do that. So once we have everything else installed, we'll come back and get our fascia put back in place. With the rest of our flat toe components installed, now we can go ahead and trim out our front fascia. Every vehicle is going to be a little bit different. In our case, since we have the tow hooks, we have these openings already there from the factory, so we don't have to worry about that. These are going to potentially interfere, these tabs here. So we're just going to trim these off. That way we don't even have to worry about it. With it being pretty thin plastic, just grab a pair of snips and cut it off. And once I have this one removed, what I'm going to do is kind of hold this up to the front of our vehicle and make sure everything's going to clear. If our wiring and other stuff that we have on the front of our vehicle is going to be in the way, we may have to trim out a small area of our grill section here. And if that's the case, not really a big deal. So we'll go ahead and do that now. So now I got a friend helping me line this back up. And just taking a quick look at it, it looks like our base plate is going to clear and come out through those factory openings. However, it does look like our wiring and some of our other components over here are going to interfere. So hold this in place and figure out if we need to cut or what we need to do to get everything to clear. And once I have that done, I'll show you how it turned out. So I got the fascia on, and here's how it turned out. Like I say, didn't have to modify these at all. But then again, every vehicle is going to be a little bit different, especially when it comes down to your other flat towing accessories. In our case, we had everything mounted to this plate here, and we just cut out a small opening in the grill to allow those components to pass through. With that said, the fascia will get re-secured to the vehicle the opposite way that we removed everything, with one exception, and that's going to be a rivet that we're going to have to put in the wheel well. So let's go ahead and check that out now. So since we drilled out the original plastic rivets, you know, we're going to need to replace them, and they actually give you the rivets that you need. However, you are going to need a rivet gun like this one here. You know, you can pick these up at your parts stores. Sometimes you can rent them at auto parts stores and so on. Either way, regardless, you are going to need to get one of these. So place a rivet in, line it up, and we'll squeeze it a few times until it hooks and you know, creates a good contact there. So the same thing for this one up here, and that's how we will re-secure these. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster base plate kit with removable arms on our 2021 Jeep Grand Cherokee.